Welcome everybody to the Arch City Poker Podcast. My name is Tony alongside Nick. We own, operate, and run archcitypoker.com. Nick, how you doing today?
Doing great. Excited for another episode. I believe number 28, correct?
That's right. Yep, we're on episode 28. We're really chugging along, and we're really cranking out some really good topics for everybody who's listening. And today's no exception. Today we're going to be talking about poker advice that is secretly terrible. And we say this from the context of what live low stakes players say at the table is kind of what their more or less bread and butter strategies are. Holy cow, my brain. So basically, just a bunch of stuff that we hear that is kind of like common vernacular at live low stakes. And when I talk about live low stakes, we're talking about 1-2, 1-3, and 2-5 primarily. That's where most of this stuff happens. And if you're listening and you're brand new, if you didn't catch last week's episode, head on over to archcitypoker.com or go ahead, like, share, and subscribe in this YouTube channel. And if you're listening to this on Spotify, head on over to the YouTube channel. And we have tons of other content, including hand history reviews and lots of other great stuff for you to dive into. And if you are heading to Las Vegas for the World Series of Poker, that just started. So good luck to you if you're heading out there. I will be heading out there myself in July. I'm going to fire some bracelet events, maybe play some deeper cash games, and hoping that the wait lists aren't too long, Nick. That's the only problem with being out there is the wait list for some of those cash games and some of those rooms gets extremely deep, and you have to be on a waiting list for a long time, and you just kind of hang out till you get a seat, and then you never want to leave, because if you do, you're not getting back in. So yeah, we're going to fire, and hopefully we're going to take home a bracelet for Arch City Poker here. Who knows? Who knows, Nick?
Yeah.
But yeah, so as we begin, Nick, and we head on over to the topic we're going to be talking about today, the first thing that I hear all the time at live low stakes, and people maybe hear this at their local room, their card club, whatever the case is, but it's never go broke with one pair. And there certainly are some instances where I'm sure that that's correct, but as a general rule of thumb, probably not the best advice to give somebody, because it takes a whole lot of context for that statement to ring true. And so, Nick, when you hear never go broke with one pair, what kinds of things are you thinking about?
Yeah, I would say back to pot ratio, just starting right away in the hand, like understanding the stack depth that you're going to play at. Is it a limp pot? Is it a single raise pot? Is it a 3-bet pot? Are we playing 100 big blind poker? Are we playing 200 plus big blind poker? What kind of board texture we have? What kind of opponent? I mean, all these things matter because there could be a scenario where I am like 100, let's say like 150, 200 bigs deep. I bet flop, I bet turn. I know my low stakes opponent, and maybe it is a regular. Maybe I do have the benefit of having additional info. Maybe it's somebody that calls twice, very capped, and I know that my one pair hand is the nuts. Okay, well, if I have that green light, like if you have the power of basically convincing your opponent to turn their hand over before you make a decision, then of course you're going to take the path where you have the right sizing. Like if it's all in, you have the best hand. Like of course you're going to do that if you see his hand. Is what I'm getting at. So yeah, guys. Like I mean, it depends on all those things. I would say just general rule of thumb. Like if you guys are quite deep, then you really need to make sure you evaluate. How are you willing to stack off one pair here? Range your opponent, cap them as early as possible. These are all staples of Arch City Poker that we talk about all the time on this platform, all the time over on the website. That's why we try to range them and cap them, because then you can decide, okay, even though this was a really high SPR situation, I have the green light to go for it with one pair here. But yeah, like speaking in generalities, or even I would say more so, especially absolutes, like you should do this here, you should not do this here. Guys, most of the time, the answer probably is it depends. I don't love the answer it depends as like a true answer, or like my favorite when I was training at Run It Once, a few of the instructors or even private one-on-one coaches I know would say like, well, it's a mix according to the solver. That's a cop-out dog shit answer also. So like it does depend, guys, but we're going to give you more specifics, and that's why we think we're a cut above a good amount of the rest here at Arch City Poker. We're going to say it depends and then give you the right answer.
Yeah, I would say generally speaking, the lower the SPR is, the more appropriate in theory it becomes, just because you don't have to defend it.
Mathematically, you just can be wider. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the deeper you are, And Nick, we were talking about this. I was playing in a pretty big game the other night, and there was an instance where I did stack off with one pair against a much shorter stack, and against a much deeper stack. It's certainly not as applicable and doesn't apply because there's so many other variables. Ranges are just a bit more. I don't know, they're a little more dynamic, but a little more capped in some circumstances. But you don't want to be stacking off with one pair when you're super deep because the larger the money gets into your one pairs is oftentimes not good. So
Generally speaking, yeah.
yeah,
But
yeah. Again, generalities, but yeah, Nick, I hear that all the time. Never go broke with one pair. Not the best advice I've ever heard. Um, the another thing I've always heard, and this is I don't know if this is because people watch other YouTube vloggers, they watch tournament poker, maybe WPT stuff, but it's you have to balance against players who are live, right? Like people hear the word balance and they think that that's a term that applies to them at a live low stakes game, and I would wholeheartedly. And we talk about this all the time, but like what exploitative poker is. But Nick, what do you think about when somebody live is talking about being balanced in a certain situation?
I think it's horrific advice for the most part. The other day I was playing with a guy that I would consider a friend that used to be more of a regular in the room, but I don't see him as much anymore. And he was telling me that another player he was playing with in a different location, he was texting him like, my friend asked this player, why'd you do X in this hand? And he replied with Y being the answer of like showing him it was like the equivalent of like a solver chart, Tony. It was like, oh, like I'm supposed to do this in this spot. And it's like, you know, we always talk about like with GTO in balance, like you would implement those things to basically protect yourself from being exploited. Like that's pretty much like in a vacuum what it is. Uh, but you don't need to do that with 99 point probably 9% of players that play in the live low stakes environments. We don't need to do that, guys. We just need to simply range them, cap them, do what we need to do according to how our hand interacts with where we think they are in their range, and we don't need to think about anything else.
Mm-hmm.
If you run into a scenario where you believe that you actually need balance and need to play GTO, for the vast majority of you, you probably should evaluate table selection and what you're doing in that game. Now, if it's like obviously a game that's higher up there, like if you're playing 10 quarter or 25-50 for some reason, you might run into a few more guys that know what they're doing, and you can tell they've worked probably with a solver or at least a instructor who's worked with a solver. So like that's a little bit different. And Tony, I think you would agree with me. There are scenarios where we might mix in a line or a sizing that actually would be GTO approved, but we're not doing it for balance. We're just doing it because that's what best works for our hand in our overall plan in that situation. We talked about that hand that you played where I think you had a 3-bet pot where you 3-bet, I think queen 10, and it came like 10-9 deuce. Like that's a spot where when we're really deep, guys, against somebody who can play back at us, it probably makes sense to do some checking back. And from a GTO perspective, because you want to be a little more polar, like you would bet better than that, and then you would bet like your bluffs, obviously. But a lot of those hands that are kind of in between that, have some showdown value, but like there's a lot that goes into it. Like it wouldn't have 3 streets of value over, with really deep stacks, basically. So like for us, we wouldn't tell you guys check because the solver wants balance here. Like we want to protect our check back range is what the player that I referred to that my friend was talking to, that's what he would say. Like, I'm protect my check back range. Like the solver says we mix betting and checking with this hand here because of balance. Now we're checking because we don't want to play for 2K with this hand, and it's probably a 2-street hand, and we don't want to face check raise. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
pretty much it, and it's a really exploitive thought process. So you guys can see how the lines can blur a little. There can be some gray with GTO, with exploitive play. Like sometimes I will do things that the solver would like, but I'm not doing it because of why the solver wants me to do it. And I'm doing it because I think it's just a better exploitative line or plan for that particular spot. And maybe it's because of a particular player. Maybe it's because we're at a particular SPR. But yeah, guys, it makes me kind of I wasn't gonna say cringe, but like it makes me like kind of tilty, to be honest, when I hear like we need to balance or we need to protect ranges, any of that stuff for these games. Like we do not need to do that, guys. Absolutely not. We are leaving money on the table, and we are also burning money in some spots if you guys are implementing too much balance or GTO.
Yeah, and I would say for anybody who's playing live low stakes, you're never going to be playing 1 2 1 3 through 5 at a table that's going to require you to be playing GTO as the best option. And I would say a lot of live low stakes players, they will accidentally do a lot of GTO approved plays, not knowing why they're doing it, but they just happen to bet here. GTO solver also would have bet here. GTO does a lot of things like it likes a lot of overbets on dynamic boards when you're in position. And that's not really a common practice that you're going to be doing at live low stakes. It's circumstantial. Sometimes, I'm sure, it's going to work out that way, but we need to factor in, stack depth, SPR. We need to put in what position are we in? What are player tendencies? There's just
Yeah,
lots
and
of.
another thing, Tony,
Yeah.
I was gonna add, or sorry, yeah, the other thing too, like this is a really important point I want to make, and you and I have talked about this before, where a lot of players that I've worked with one on one before, they'll ask me, well, Nick, I get that we want to play like max exploitative poker. I think most people know that for live low stakes if they're, like for profit players, if you will. But what they I think the misconception or the flawed line of thinking, if you will, is a lot of them will say, well, I like to fall back on balance or GTO against a good player in the pool. Like you can run into some guys that aren't necessarily like the tryhards that are bad, but like what if you do run into like the occasional like good player in your room? What if there is a pro that plays in some of those games in your room? Guys, 99% of the players that you would confidently and accurately deem good, they're going to be good in winning money in those games because they are playing a max exploitive strategy. So it doesn't mean just because they're good or they're one of the better players in the room, it doesn't mean that they're playing a style that requires you to play with balance. It's really about like who can exploit who with like in who can correctly counter the other. And like a lot
Mm-hmm.
of those guys that are quote good aren't good enough to still even do that. So like that's Tony, I just always find that one funny where it's like, what if I run into a good player and I need to like revert back to a baseline GTO? No, you don't need to do that because they're not doing any of that. They're doing
Nobody's
things
that
you're
good.
doing. Yeah, right.
Yeah. I think the only time I've actually utilized, well, the most often I utilize a GTO strategy would just be in a live low stakes game. Sometimes I think about what a solver would do in a spot. Not that I'm going to do that, but I use that as like an option as to like, what does a solver want to do here? A solver wants to do, they want to check here a lot. Well, does that make sense in this specific spot against this player? Yeah, I think it does. Or I'll say, no, it doesn't. I think we can actually get some small value, some thin value here with a bet. And because I think a solver more often than not will have you check a lot of your flop sets, a lot of your like really top of range stuff because they want a lot of the times they want the player to kind of catch up or they want future streets to have to be getting value from something, but the solver doesn't take into account who the villains are in the hand and what their
Yeah,
tendencies are. Only you know what that is. So like
right.
when I'll be flopping a lot of sets in live low stakes or I'll be flopping straights or flushes, I'm oftentimes leading in those spots when I think a solver would want some checkbacks in a lot of circumstances, especially if I'm out of position. So, but as an exploit, what I like to do is take those hands and try to get some thin value right away. Then I'll start cranking it up the more the later streets we start to go down. So, but yeah, there's like a lot of for the most part for anybody listening, I think the solver is good to help you kind of branch out and understand what's possible within a hand. And I think the solver teaches a lot of important value lessons as far as a lot of people don't think about overbets, and a solver will tell you when a certain situation would be appropriate to overbet. And it would be nice for you to see what that looks like, but that doesn't mean that in every spot you encounter live that's what you have to do. But I think there is some value as far as thinking about what an option of action is, but I don't think it's what you should be doing in most circumstances.
Yeah, I think the only like I have a very heavy GTO background from when I made videos, and this was even with PLO for Run It Once. But like that's it's more of like a high stakes community. There's definitely more like a lot of the guys, the stakes that they're playing, they definitely need to be balanced and they need to be pretty strong with the solvers. For you guys, like let's say you wanted to dive into something like GTO Wizard for a month, or let's say you have Pio Solver, you have a solver on hand. Doesn't matter what it is, I guess. The way that I would go about using it efficiently to get better as a live low stakes player is go through the most common spot that you're going to end up in. And this is part of the problem with a solver for these stakes is that the more multi-way you become, the less accurate the solutions are. So the way I would look at it is, you know, when you come over to archetypepoker.com, we're going to teach you how to play much more aggressive, like more 3-bet, trying more like large raise sizes to get pots heads up, if you will. That's where the solver can come in handy, because then how I would use it is, and if you have worked with it a lot and you have the ability to put in like custom ranges and kind of solve for exploitative solutions, that's how I've used it before. But what you can do is if you just look at baseline strategies, you can see what your opponent is supposed to be doing and then come up with what your counter or what your exploit is going to be based on how far they deviate from the baseline. That's what you should be using GTO for. You shouldn't be using it to protect yourself. You should be using it to become a more efficient exploitative killer in these games.
Yeah, when I found the most use out of it too, Nick, when I could actually customize the specific villain within a hand and then have GTO tell me some workarounds for what I'm experiencing. That was the best value, is when I would just like create a villain within like GTO Wizard and like actually have
100%.
Their specific hand ranges and tendencies. And then
and
the
guys,
solver helps me out.
And guys, like to wrap this part of the topic up tonight is that, like, to give you a really good idea of what you're truly missing out on over at archetypepoker.com is, like, for example, Tony, one of our bread and butter strategies in position, generally speaking, is to bet range for small.
Boom.
Do you guys know how we came up with that? From going through GTO stuff, because we would put in, okay, what does our opponent do out of position as a live low stakes, just unknown, probably like just recreational loose passive player for the most part. Like, what do like over 95% of these guys do? What do they not do is another question you can ask. They don't play aggressively enough. So like they'll call too wide and not balance. Like they won't check call with strong enough hands. They'll just check raise those, and they won't check raise with enough weak hands. So when we bet small, their reaction to that is going to be like, we basically put that into a solver, and the solver's like, okay, generally speaking, if your opponent is not aggressive enough in a spot, your betting frequency should go up. Now, it doesn't mean that your sizing necessarily goes up, because they're not necessarily capped yet. But then that's when we get to the turn, and you guys might say, if you're familiar with our strategies, it's like, whoa, like you guys are over betting a lot of turns, like with a lot of air in a lot of spots. Okay, you guys want to know why? Because the solver recognized that this player is moving to the turn incredibly capped. We are uncapped, and they are going to defend very poorly against that. So a lot of our strategies, guys, they are incredibly exploitative in nature, but we've had the help of the aid of a solver, and they're like almost like really like solver approved exploitative strategies. So we can save you guys a ton of time, and candidly, probably, I mean, like I would say realistically can save you a little bit, like as far as like if you're looking to dive into like months of solver work for live low stakes games, like we've taken care of a lot of that over the years. And I'm not promising any results or anything. Like I'm not saying obviously like it's guaranteed we're going to save you money. I'm just letting you guys know that like we've done the work, and we've put it into where like it's tailor-made strategies for these games with the help of a solver.
Yeah, agreed, Nick. Yeah, I think, and if anybody's been listening, I think, you hit it right on the head, which is a lot of the strategies are based off of GTO algorithms and
exploits
baselines anyway. So it's just taking those and modifying them for the audience that you're going to be playing against. It's all that.
Yeah.
And it is. And sometimes it's hard. It's like a translator, right? You have a whole bunch of gibberish in front of you, and it might be the most amazing stuff in the world, but if you can't decipher it, then what good is it to you? So sometimes it's nice to have somebody just like strip away the fat, take away the solver and all the confusing different algorithms and things you can do with GTOW, and you need someone to tell you you're going to bet in position more often than not because of this. You're going to be checking out of position because of this. In multi-way pots, you're going to be checking a lot because of XYZ. And you're going to be learning in your live low stakes games. You're like, that's actually saving me some value in some spots that maybe I would have lost, or maybe a habit
Yep.
that you are currently experiencing that is maybe not the best thing. So yeah, Nick, perfect. The next thing, Nick, and I hear this all the time, I'm sure everybody listening to has as well. Listening has, yep, those words. Tight
Something like that.
is right. I hear that a
Hmm.
lot. Do you hear that? What
Mhm.
what do you think about the guy who says, you know what, tight is right? That's my bread and butter.
Again, depends, but I will dive into this further just because it is a podcast. I mean, I think generally speaking, if you're going to choose a style of play that's going to put you in a position to succeed more often than fail in live low stakes games, I do think that the vast majority of you guys are playing too many hands pre-flop and you're not playing aggressively enough post-flop. So I would say shifting to a tighter, more aggressive. Some players would say like tag or tight aggressive. That's not exactly how we played Archie poker. I think we have moments of that. If we have to play high rake 100 big blind or less poker, I think it does skew a little more towards that style. But I think like you have to understand, like, again, it's context matters. Like, are we tight in a sense that we're playing tighter pre-flop because of rake? Yeah, absolutely. Tight is right.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're playing in a game where it's time rake, or you're playing in a home game where there is no rake, or in a club where just it's maybe it is time rake or whatever. The point is like it absolutely matters. And so like as you guys get deeper, like let's say we have a 200 big blind scenario and you're in position against vastly inferior opponents as far as skill, then tight is not necessarily right. Like, yes, against multiple limpers, like we generally want to be tighter, but like if you're able to get pots heads up, if you're able to three bet a loose and bad player and you can get him heads up for deep stacks post flop, like we like arguably could use anything, guys. Like we could use anything that's playable if you're comfortable post flop. And that's another thing that we teach you at Art Shape Poker is like it's, we want to have solid pre-flop ranges, but it's more like we want to put ourselves in positions to succeed. And with our post-flop skill edge, a lot of times for me, like it's not so much about like the cards I'm holding. It's just about the scenario that I can put my opponent in and
Mm-hmm.
how I can make money off of him. So yeah, I would say Tony, like that one's not as bad. I mean, I think generally tight is right pre-flop and take into rate considerations, but understand that most of you guys are too tight or passive post flop, in my opinion. I think there's a lot of spots where, like, yeah, going back to like if you guys looked at solver baselines, you'd be like, wow, this thing's a savage, and it's doing some things that I would never think to do. That's because a lot of you guys are just definitely looking at your two cards and playing a little too passively. So it's context matters with tight is right.
I would say people who say that don't know why they're saying it.
Yeah,
From our standpoint, yeah, you want to be tighter because the rake will just, it's hard to beat the rake if you're going to be playing in a lot of pots. Like in the 5-5-10 that I play, and it's a time rake game, so you can be much more active and not have to worry about like what the rake's going to be doing for your winning strategy. So, but I would
right.
say tight is right is it's fine at most live low stakes games just because people call too wide, they play too many hands. So if you tightened up, in theory, you're just getting a lot of value. Your ace jacks are beating king
Yeah.
jacks. Your king queens are beating king jacks. So just that
Yep.
kind of stuff. So yeah, kind of, it's right. But if it's
Yep.
like what your bread and butter strategy is, I think you're just missing out on so much. And they're not thinking about somebody who thinks like tight is right does not have the capacity or has not demonstrated that they can understand how ranges work, because then they
Yeah.
would not be thinking about typing the correct strategy. Now they might accidentally be correct, because if you have, I'm going to be dramatic here, like you're at an 8-handed table and 6 of those are Tonys like me, and all the Tonys are aggressive, yeah, it's probably correct to be a little bit tighter, just because there's a lot of 3
Yeah.
betting, a lot of 4 betting. You don't need to mix in stuff like 7-8 suited. So
Right.
yeah, I would say overall there's some merit to it, but overall live low stakes, you really just need to kind of be like water and just kind of bend with the terrain that you're kind of going through. Another one, Nick, that I hear is you can just take a hand and pretend it's aces, and that's like a winning strategy. I hear that all the time, right? If you just pretend like you have aces, you suddenly have the courage to go bet, 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 and you can win with any hand. And I'm sure you've heard that before, but what do you think about how you take hands and just pretend like they're aces as a strategy?
Uh, I don't know. I guess I think it's stupid. I mean, like
It's not
I
good.
think yeah, I think the players that I've heard say that, like something to that extent, like say to another player, like just pretend you have this. Like I've said that jokingly to players before that will say something and I know they're super nitty and it's like I'm kind of saying in a subtle way like I don't think you understand your image like if you do go bet it's going to look like you have like a set and like people are just going to make huge folds to you but they'll never like a lot of these guys they might even know that or sense that but they just candidly don't have the stones to pull it off like they just won't do it.
Hmm.
um yeah, I think that I don't know like for me it's again like what kind of opponent am I most likely getting involved with post flop? And that's going to more or less determine the types of hands I'm going to play. And so, like, I'll have scenarios where I will have like some jack seven suited and some pocket deuces and hands like I'm playing more aggressively than the average player. But it's because it's more like I'm going to be able to run over this guy post flop. It's not about like the kind of hands they'll make. I'm not pretending to like always have like big hands, obviously. So yeah, I don't really care for that one all that much, Tone. I think that with our teachings, they won't have to ever think like that.
Yeah. If there's one thing that it does do is it gives somebody the experience of betting with a non-made hand in a lot of
Yeah.
cases. And that's not an experience that I think live low stakes players have a lot, which is taking their overs and blasting off with it. Or,
Right.
sometimes they might accidentally have blockers like Queen King on a, I don't know, just make it up. Like King Queen is blockers to most straight draws and overs, and maybe some of the more nutted combos your villain's likely to have. So you're taking that hand and you're running with it, and it might work out for you. And that's probably where the verbiage came from, which is I can take any two cards and bet, and opponents most often than not fold to me because honestly, if you're barreling all three streets, that's pretty indicative of a strong line or a strong hand. But they oftentimes get in trouble is because they're not evaluating the board. They're not analyzing the
Yeah.
pre-flop action. They're doing it from out of position instead of in position. There's just so many nuances to it. And that's actually going to take
Yeah.
us to the next question or the next thing, which is like the results meaning that they played the hand correctly. So kind of like if they won the hand, they played it right. And I think that's
Yeah.
a really common misconception. And
Yep.
I think it's an issue that a lot of live low stakes players have because they think if they, oh, I don't know, what are some of the more outlandish things I've seen? Like taking over pairs and just like check raising all in for a massive amount when they certainly didn't need to. And yeah, they might win, they might get a fold. But does that mean that the line was correct, Nick? What do you think?
Yeah. The whole like there's a couple different layers that I could peel to this one. Like Tony, there's a guy that plays in the morning that you might know. Older gentleman who he is infamous in our room for years for limping and then jamming as much as 200 bigs over somebody's standard open. And
Yeah.
I've heard him say many times before, well, yeah, if I just win the 15 to 30 bucks that he wins, he's like, yeah, if I just keep winning that every time, like then I'm golden. And like sure, when he does that, people are going to fold the vast majority of their range. He is going to win rake free pots. The problem is when he gets calls, they typically are at top of range, and he's not doing it with just top of range, and so he loses 150 to 200 bigs when he does lose. So he has to win like 10 to what 20 math is tough when it's this late, guys, but you get the idea. Like he'd have to win so many uncontested pots to just break even in that
Mhm.
scenario. Just like an extreme example, but like yeah, guys, like you don't want to be results oriented. A lot of the players that I've worked with one-on-one before, I would say the vast majority, if not all, contacted me when they were in the middle of a downswing. And players are always looking to improve during a downswing. Or if you take it a step further with the irrational thought process, I see and hear players live blame the like they want to get a deck washed because the shuffler is somehow not giving them good enough hands, or like they step away from the table when a certain dealer sits down, or like a dealer's the one that always costs them. It's always something else and not their own play, generally speaking. And then when they're winning, it's not like, oh, the shuffler like is giving me good cards or the dealer's going to no, it's like they might not say it, but they might think like, hey, like I played that hand pretty well. So
Hmm.
it's always like give themselves credit when things are going good, but blame somebody else or don't take accountability when things aren't going well. So you guys have to be really careful about that. Um, I do think that being a little results oriented and yeah, and taking a step further, Tony, and getting back to like, how you played a hand, like that's the thing is like, if you guys, even if you don't come over to artshadepoker.com, which you're making a huge mistake if you don't, but like, even if you don't work with Tony I on the site or even one-on-one, if there's, possible coaching in your future, um, like if you guys are working on your own, be mindful that you don't want to just look at sessions where you lost or look at big pots where you lost. Like you need to analyze spots when you're winning or in an upswing too, because it could just be like a lot of variance is really padding your stats. Guys don't take into account like you always want to be checking your game and always trying to, it sounds like cliche or whatever, but like you do want to get like that 1% better every day if you can. And it's reviewing hands that you won and lost and reviewing when you're in an upswing and not just a downswing and taking accountability for your play. And sure, like if you go through the process correctly, you might come to a sense that it's mostly variance. I mean, honestly, guys, when Tony comes to me these days, like there might be a hand or two where he took maybe like the second or third best line, but compared to 10 years ago, like 10 years ago, it wasn't variance. Like Tony was just not playing well. Like he was not playing well. But now he's playing well
Yeah.
enough that he was able to turn this into a professional career now.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like it's whenever we talk about downswings, like it's probably going to be mostly variance for players that are very good, but we still need to take accountability even ourselves. And we need to look at hands, look at these spots, and always try to get better. So, yeah, I little long-winded. I know there are a couple layers there, guys, but that question, that one's an interesting one, and I think that yeah, it's one that we see in the live low stakes. Tony has a lot of irrational thoughts going on with that one.
Yeah. And I would say, I think you're exactly right. I have, so, I mean, we've talked about this before, but I have like a book that I kept from like years ago of like, I'd take like a notebook to a poker room and I'd write down hands that I played. And at the time I thought I was a thinking player and I was like break even to like losing. And I would look at those hands today and I'm like, ugh, it's pretty
Yeah.
rough. And
No, I mean, like I remember our first call, and then right when I hung up, I was like, "This guy sucks." But no, I'm just kidding. But like, yeah, I think that yeah, it's honestly like your proof. And I sucked at one point too. Honestly, most every human sucks at poker if you like look at how it's supposed to really be played. But like, I think that it's proof that if you put the time in, you can get better. And luckily for you guys, like in my case, like a lot of literature, like there were like blogs and like kind of like okay YouTube videos with honestly some flawed thinking and logic compared to like what we have available to us now. So it took me years and years and years of like somewhat efficient studying and improvement, but there are definitely some inefficiencies in there, like going through processes where I thought I was right for a while and then I'd had to change things. But that's the beauty of this, of our training site and this platform, is that if you guys come through YouTube, you see all the content we have put up, all the content we're going to put up. If you want to take it a step further, if you are serious about becoming a more skilled player, then you need to come to archsavepoker.com and where again we've done a lot of the work for you. You're gonna have to put your own work in, but we've set you guys up for success in a more efficient manner.
yeah. And I want to kind of double back for a little bit when we're talking about like incorrect plays winning hands and then people thinking that they're correctly played hands. I mean, I would, conversely, good decisions can oftentimes lead to losing hands, right? And a lot of
Yep.
live low stakes players experience that and they sometimes get upset about it, but it your job again is not to win every hand. It is to play correctly. And sometimes that means we are still going to lose. Like how many times do live low stakes players call bets, call shoves, call over bets with hands that have no business, or maybe they have a gut shot and they just have a feeling, or they think that they're due, and maybe they turn their set that they were calling with because they haven't had one in a month. Like who knows what the reason is, but it's just your job to make good decisions. And how are you going to know what good decisions are unless you're evaluating what your winning hands are, what your losing hands are. I played a couple games professionally before I took poker to the level that it's at now. And we would, in the games that I played, some of the RTSs that I played, we would have days where it was nothing but reviewing replays of the games we played to evaluate winning or losing. What could we have done better in XYZ spot? What strategy did they do? How did we react? Was it the right play? We just go over all these different things. And that's kind of like what diagnosing a hand is, which is, I would say, pick hands that either made you feel uncomfortable, or maybe there was a lot of money in the middle, or the result was maybe a little bit unorthodox, or you had a strong hand in a multi-way pot, stuff that is like a little, gives people a little bit of level of uncomfort. Those are the things you should evaluate, not whether or not you won or lost the hand. Because if you're doing it right, it should kind of be a mixture of both. But yeah, Nick.
Yeah, you're right. I just put a bow on that. Like, guys, he's totally right as far as like it's going to sound counterintuitive, but the results do not matter. Like, they matter in the long run because that proves that the process is correct, but the process is what matters in the short term. You're at the mercy of the deck in the short term, guys. So you could play for months and make really good decisions and not really, do all that well, but it's the process that matters. Like, how are you thinking through hands? Are you ranging opponents correctly? Are you capping them like we teach you as early as you can? It's stuff like that. Like, Tony's right. Like, it's the guys, the results really don't matter in the short term at all. It's about the process.
Yeah, and the only time the results do matter is when you're hurting on money. Like, let's just be real. Like, if you are financially strapped or losing 2 buy-ins impacts some aspect of your life, that's why results matter. If you had $1 million and you lost 200, you don't care. Like,
right.
But if you have 1,000 and you lose 200, that's a big deal. So
yeah, you gotta be rolled.
Yep. My last question for you, Nick, and it kind of is going to piggyback off what we've been talking about, but why do you think live low stakes players struggle with separating luck from skill?
Oh,
small question at the very end.
No,
here.
I mean, like, yeah, I think it's easy to answer. I'm not a psychologist, but like, I do think that it's just humans are pretty notoriously awful at properly weighing risk reward. And so I think like we've heard, like, you guys, if you're listening to this, like, I mean, you probably play enough poker that you definitely, I think when you hear players talk about hands and they talk about being unlucky versus lucky, like, they don't understand how many hands they truly need to get a proper sample size. I think, again, they give themselves too much credit when they win. They basically deflect too much when they lose. And so, like, it's just a big pot of all these either misconceptions or irrational thought processes about the game. I think, again, like, this just goes back, guys, to like understanding the process and having a accurate representation of like what luck and what skill looks like. Like, poker in the short term is definitely much more dependent on luck. Like, Tony and I can make really good decisions, find the best line in a hand in the short term. And yes, of course, like, maybe the skill gap is so large compared to a recreational player that, maybe we will pile up like more, like maybe our skill does help us in the short term, but at the end of the day, like, we're still at the mercy of the deck a lot of the time. Like, it's still spots where we run into, like, guys that draw out on you, or they do flop a set. Again, it's about the process. Like, if a player, I get this question all the time. We've talked about this like in many episodes where like like when somebody finds out what I do for a living, and then they'll ask me like, "Oh, okay," and if they feel comfortable enough, they'll say something like, "Do you play pocket fives for like against a raise?" And it's like, okay, so this is the kind of person that honestly, they'll play their pocket fives against a $25 raise with a $150 stack. They'll flop a set, they'll win a nice hand, and they'll think to themselves, "That's why you set mine." When in fact, we know that this is usually not a good spot with that shallow to be playing that hand from out of position. And so it's, understanding that the process matters, the results in the short term, luck versus skill. Like, Poker is a skill game in the long term. The better player will mathematically win out in the long term as long as he doesn't succumb to tilt. Talk about that a lot on this platform and over at archcitypoker.com as well. But yeah, Tony, I think that's always a comical thing that I hear when I hear about the luck versus skill, or lucky versus unlucky. Like this always happens to me, or that guy always has it, and I always see him winning or whatever. It's like there's definitely more to it than like everybody over the long term is going to flop the same amount of sets, guys. You're going to get sucked out on pretty much the same amount of times. It's all mathematically going to work out pretty much the same. Now, if we get to years down the road, is there going to be somebody that did run better than somebody else? But not by much, guys. Like it's not going to be enough to really like determine that like luck is definitely a factor over a significant sample size. The guys that are truly good poker players, and again, going back to live low stakes, the guys that know how to exploit, that know how to honestly like see their opponents with their cards up on their foreheads and range them and cap them and exploit. Those are the guys that are going to win. They're like almost guaranteed going to win. Now, we don't guarantee anything at archshapepoker.com, but just know that it's logical that if you're the better player in the long term, it's going to be skill over luck. But in the short term, yes, the skill gap is definitely a little bit narrower just because luck is going to be more of a thing with a small sample size.
Yeah, I mean, I can't add a whole lot to that. From my experience, what has separated me from the majority is just being able to range people and understand like where my hand stacks up against the player type and
Yeah.
the hand history. I think I've made, because I mean, the most common example I can think of is people who get kings run into aces, and people who that happens to, they think that they're just the most unlucky person in the world because every time they have kings, they feel like there's an ace on the flop or they run into aces. And I've had times where, depending on who the villain is, like I've been like 5-bet and I've had kings and I'm like they never 5-bet with anything other than aces here. This is just not
Right.
This is not this is never ace king. This is never queens. It's always aces. Or at best, it's also kings, in which case I'm chopping. And this is just a fold. In this specific spot against this person, this is a fold. And I never fold kings lately, but if the circumstance happens to be that way, that is an example of like not running into aces with kings all the time. It's just being able to diagnose the situation with the hand. And I know that's a very like common, easy example, but I mean, it happened to me maybe 2 weeks ago. I think I texted you a hand against a guy who is pretty nitty. And I would say when this player 5-bet jammed all in, that's about the nittiest thing I could ever think of the player doing, because they don't 5-bet. That's not a thing. They hardly 3-bet, let alone 5-bet. So yeah, kings went in the trash, and it's just wouldn't even have thought. It was just like, yep, that sucks. Next hand. That's how I thought about it, and maybe they were just, I don't know. Who knows what they thought?
Yep.
But I just tackle your sentiment, Nick. The more
Yeah, I
knowledge you
think,
have, the more understanding on playing. I think you just make better decisions, and then that luck versus skill slowly translates into a little more skill.
Yep, and to give you guys one quick last little like nugget here, if you will, if you've never thought about it like this, like if you are one that you think like, oh, these guys are wrong, like I do run poorly compared to others, like I get quote sucked out on more than others. Guys, I've been in the industry a long time. Like there are a lot of players that would argue that, and I'm not saying this is exactly the number, but there are a lot of players that would argue that you need to see 100,000 hands to know how truly good you are against a population. Like, what's your true win rate? At least 50,000. A lot will say. Now, like live low stakes, like the skill gap's larger. Maybe you could cut that back, but I would say most would say 50 to 100,000 is a really good number. Guys, think about how many hands a dealer can get out in a down. How many hours you guys truly play a week? Like some of you are only seeing like 100 hands a day, maybe. So like you can do the math, like to get to 50 to 100,000 hands, like it's going to take a while. And especially if you play in a higher variance environment. If you play in a 2-5 or a 5-5 or 5-10 no limit game or PLO game, like if you're playing with much more aggressive players, or if you're playing with a structure that breeds more aggressiveness, more variance, then you definitely need a much larger sample size to know your true win rate.
Yeah.
But if you are playing, yeah, if you're playing, let's say 1-3, and you are significantly better than the rest of the pool, then yeah, there's gonna be less variance. You probably don't need as many hands. Now, like for Tony and I, it's definitely a different scenario. Like we've been playing long enough, I guess, especially myself at the level I've been at, that like I can sit down and pretty quickly diagnose like who is not horrible, but like most players are just pretty rough, to be honest. But if I were to play, if I had to move, for example, guys, and I had to go and I started playing 5-10 in Washington, D.C., and they're 5-10 to limit game, it's notoriously pretty tough. I would need many hands in that game to know where I truly stand. Now, like, could I get a feel for my skill level against the other players in that game pretty early on? Probably, but I would want a larger sample size to know if it is just variance, which there is going to be more variance in that kind of game, or if my skill level is where I think it is. So it just depends, guys. But yeah, just to give you like that's just to give you an idea to where like if you think you're one that like, oh, I just run bad, or like I always get sucked out on in this room or this dealer, like guys, like be honest with yourself. Like how many hands a week are you really seeing? Because you could play 10, 20, 30,000 hands and play perfect poker and be losing.
I can
So
think
like
of one dealer that crushes me, Nick, and you're good friends with him.
he crushes everybody except for me. Somehow.
I'm pretty sure the dealer thing's actually true.
Yeah, right.
No, but yeah, Nick, I think you're exactly right. That's going to actually take us right to the limit here to cap off episode 28. If you enjoyed the podcast, leave a comment, tell us what you want us to talk about next week. And Nick, do you have any final words or thoughts for everybody heading into next week?
No, I mean, for this topic, there's more to it. So if you guys have ones of your own that you've heard players say, or misconceptions or irrational thoughts, you can put them in the comment section, and we'll definitely get in there and chat it up with you about those. But yeah, I don't have anything further, Tim.
Awesome. All right, everybody, head on over to archcitypoker.com if you're brand new, and share, and subscribe to our channel so you get the podcast for next week. Thank you, everybody, and have a fantastic rest of your day.